with me. Keep such fun. Jump with me.
And what are your names?
I'm Hannah.
Hannah?
Marilyn.
Hannah and Marilyn. Jared, how did you, am I good if I, okay. Hannah and Marilyn. So, it's sort of become this neologism, this idea of male privilege, and I know we talk about it a lot on campus, and I've had some conversations with people on campus today. I don't agree with the premise, but I'm open to having my mind changed.
Okay, Marilyn, go first. Well, male privilege is definitely a real thing.
Okay.
Our country was built by white males, and it was built for white males.
Mm-hmm.
That's why women and any minority don't have an equal chance of being in politics. That's why most of our politicians are white males instead of representative of the actual population. That's why gerrymandering exists. That's why redlining exists. White privilege and white male privilege and male privilege is a real thing.
Okay, so I want to make sure I have this clear. Do you agree with what she
Yeah,
said?
I absolutely agree.
Okay, sorry. So I'm trying to try and balance this with the both of you. Hope you forgive me if I'm not perfect. So you believe that this country was founded by white males exclusively for
I don't
white.
believe it was. I know it is.
Okay, you know it.
Yeah.
So what would you use to substantiate that? A lot of white males obviously came here because Western civilization, people came from Europe, a lot of white males, but that it was founded exclusively for white males. That's what you said. Yeah, how do you...
Male-dominated society.
But that doesn't imply, that doesn't necessarily equate to design.
The Constitution originally didn't mention women or black people or anything, or minorities or anything. It only mentioned white men. It didn't specifically say white, but it said men. They didn't give any minorities the right to anything. We had to fight for that right.
Who's we?
The minorities, women had to, people of color had to, everyone had to, except for white males.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. So you're saying that the Constitution, first off, mentioned only white men? I would say
It didn't say white men. It said men.
Mankind, men.
Man,
Yeah. So this
yes.
was a term. Again, this is just sort of a colloquialism. Men. The rights were extended to women. You're aware, right?
They weren't extended to women. Women had to fight for their rights.
No, women never had to fight for the freedom of speech or Second Amendment.
Well, what do you mean women didn't have to fight for these rights? They literally had marching. Women were hurt for this, like
for the First Amendment and Second Amendment, women didn't have
for
the
the
right
right
to
to vote, for the right to not be treated as property.
Okay, so that's interesting that you bring up the right to vote. So you say we fought for it, everyone except for white men.
No, some white men did, but
Some
it was
white men.
mostly women.
So
And
it was mostly
honestly,
women and minorities.
It was mostly white women at first who didn't include black women.
Okay, so who do you believe procured the right for women to vote?
Women fighting for it.
Really?
Yeah, white men wouldn't have gave it to women if they didn't fight for it.
So you believe a majority of women you believe were suffragettes, fought for the right to vote?
I don't know if it was a majority, but I know women did, and we wouldn't have it if those women hadn't stood up for it.
Okay, well, because it seems like we're going through a historical timeline. Historically, that's actually not accurate. The majority of women...
Historically, that is accurate.
So women actually, the majority of women didn't want the right to vote. It was men who
I
gave them the
told
right
you
to vote.
I didn't know if it was the majority, but it wouldn't have happened if women
Okay.
haven't stood up in the suffragist movement and fought
Well, the
for
reason
it.
I bring that up is because you said women and minorities fought for that right, not white
Yes.
men. When the fact is women actually, as a majority, didn't fight for that right. Many of them fought against it. White men fought for that and were the ones who signed that into law.
Because of women, they wouldn't have signed it into law if women hadn't made them sign it into law.
But they didn't. The majority of women didn't want it. That's my point. And the reason they didn't want it, by the way, we'll move on from this, was because of the fact that voting came with the draft, mandatory bucket duty responsibilities that were actually not bestowed upon women at that time, and they didn't want the right to vote because it would come with the same responsibilities. So women got the right to vote, but they didn't have to be a part of the draft or mandatory bucket duty, mandatory firefighting service. So historically, I'm just saying that's actually, it's not really accurate. It paints an inaccurate picture.
I know
which
there
I would
were
disagree.
women. There was an anti-suffragist movement. I know conservative women didn't want the right to vote, but it's because of women that they were given the right to vote. And of course, there's going to be people on each side, but there's going to be women who want to stay in the home. But the whole point of women fighting for it is so they have that choice to stay in the home or go out to vote,
Sure.
or go into the draft if they want to.
Well, I don't think you. respectfully, you fundamentally have a misunderstanding of the draft. It's
No,
not,
I go into
not
war, not
voluntary.
the draft. I don't believe in drafting anyone at all. I don't believe
at
you
the
should
time,
fight
it was
for a
a part
war
of
that
voting.
you
But at
shouldn't.
a time, it was a part of voting. That's my point. My only point here is you said it was a society designed by white men, exclusively for
Yes.
white men, and gave some examples which weren't accurate. So let me bring us to today. What rights are afforded in 2018 to men exclusively that aren't afforded to women?
It's-
And I would like both of you to answer, because I don't want you to just sit there and feel like I don't want to cut you out of this.
No, I think Marilyn's explaining it really well. I just don't think you're understanding her side and how
Okay.
she's saying that it was a two-sided thing. So there are women who want to stay at home and live that life, and there are women who wanted the right to vote, to have their voice heard and their representation.
Sure.
And I think you want to focus on the conservative side that wanted to stay at home, and she's trying to say,
No, not at
well,
all.
they got the option to stay at home because other women were fighting for their right to vote.
No, that's not what I was presenting from my side at all.
Yes, it was.
No, let me clarify one more time then, okay? And I want to make it really clear, not only for you, for anyone watching. You said this was a society created by white men, exclusively for white men. And women and minorities had to fight for these rights, and you used examples as voting, and white men didn't. What I am pointing out is that is inaccurate. White men did, most women didn't want it. So that's a false
doesn't mean
premise
they
that
don't.
paints a false it's a false baseline for today. Because if you say at one point, now I think women should have the right to vote. I'm very glad that we all do. Okay, we can agree on that. What I can't agree with is something that is historically inaccurate. So I'd like to find something we agree on today. What rights today in 2018 are afforded to men that are not afforded to women? I don't believe that there's systemic male privilege today. I'm not saying I could be wrong. I don't believe it though.